Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Life Administration Podcast. My name is Ryan Talon, and with me, as always, is
Leslie Loftus. Hello, everyone.
And today we have a very special guest.
Hi, I'm Jim.
This is Jim, and
recognized from the voice at the beginning of all the podcasts.
Right.
Involuntarily on camera today.
Yes, guys.
We had to drag him on camera. He likes being the voice on the. Yeah.
Yep. So
playing to my strengths.
I get to kind of sit back, and I would just tell everyone to buckle up because I get a feeling this is going to be a fun one. I took a peek at the show notes about 30 seconds before we hit record, and I started laughing hysterically. So I think it's going to be a fun one. So the episode today is conflict resolution. Right. So let's start off. Jim, why don't you just give us a little bit of background, who you are and what you do, and why are you relevant for talking about conflict resolution?
And already one eyebrow.
I know.
Only one eyebrow. I'm Leslie's husband. That's my primary role in life. How's that?
Not what we were going for, but okay.
I'm a father of four. I have three daughters, so I have no fear. I've been through everything you can be through. No, I am a lawyer here in Houston. I teach law at the University of Texas. I have lived and worked in my area of the legal world, which is international law, in Moscow, in the Middle East, in London, in Switzerland. Leslie and I have been married now about 20 years, 20 years this year, in fact.
Mm-hmm. And your primary practice area these days is?
Dispute resolution. I mostly work in disputes involving governments or state entities, which are not the most receptive to dispute resolution. In that way, they mirror teenage girls. So there's a tremendous similarity between Iraq versus Turkey and Peyton versus Leslie.
I see.
There's less hostage taking.
Yes, over there.
I didn't say that.
Not funny.
Awesome.
But so tons of experience with dispute resolution.
In marriage, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, you mean the real world? Yes, that too.
Yes.
Told you didn't want me on camera.
Yeah. So Leslie, how are you feeling right now that Jim's right here, and how are you doing? Like this has to be different from you. I'm just thinking if Lauren was sitting right here, I'd probably be mortified. So
one, I'm a little bit used to it. We have, as you know, we've been married for 20 years, and two, so Jim is 10 years my senior in both age and...
that came out early. I was expecting that would be...
I threw that card. You better believe it. But
and
also...
10 years wiser. Don't forget that.
That's where I'm going with this. Would you just hush? Also in law. So when we first got married, I had just graduated from law school and I had just started working as an attorney, and Jim was a 10-year plus attorney at that time. And we've discussed in the past, that both of us had early marriage issues. That was actually mostly the two of us, right?
fact.
Right. I had enough professional training and enough professional expertise to know that I was being not really outwitted, but out-talented, out-skilled in dispute resolution. He's just really, really good at it. And when we were first married...
Yes, but you made up for it in sheer aggression.
Thanks, babe.
I'm here for you.
But, I could actually see him working through the problems that we were having at various times. And, and now looking back, really, it was just leadership. But, so I've seen him doing this for quite some time. And I hope to say that, we've gotten much, much better at arguing.
Oh, absolutely.
It's not even close.
Yeah, it's good. I don't think we actually have anything approaching fights any longer. Mostly because of things that we're going to talk about today, about self-editing and
right. Well, there was one event with the dog. Early in our marriage, we got so mad at each other we scared our dog.
We scared our dog. And
the dog jumped because you've heard him speak, so you can imagine when he actually does yell, it's windows shaking. The border collie jumped up in his lap and pulled his hands down and then turned around to me like begging me, stop. And it was just enough of a pause for us to... And I don't think we've had a fight.
Not since
that was in month 6 of our marriage, and I bet we haven't had half a dozen arguments approaching that level.
Oh gosh,
in the
nothing,
intervening 19
in
years.
10 years, nothing even
And by
close.
the way, they were about a lot more important things than what we were arguing about at that 6-month mark.
Well, when you've been shamed by a canine, it does sort of put your behavior in perspective.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, definitely. All right, so let's get going. So let's talk about some of the things that cause domestic conflict, right? So you guys have 20 years of marriage now. What are some of the traps that people need to avoid, or maybe even some that you guys have walked into in the past?
Well, in my view, it's not the big things. Crises, disasters, over time, those are actually easier things to navigate. Interpersonal conflict between husband and wife, or between me and my daughter who's sitting across the room here, smirking at me, that tends to recede in the face of a shared significant problem, right? People focus on the task at hand.
But there is a lot of, the stuff that you read about and you hear about from friends, who puts the toothpaste cap on, how you, one of our early ones, this was just a bickering thing, but I have very particular ideas about how to set things up in the refrigerator.
Very particular.
Like how? Like what? Like give me an example.
Don't go there, Ryan.
And duplicates have to be back to it's the front one that you're using.
Don't go there.
The front one that you're using
This is going
needs to be in the
long
front, and then the other one's in the back. Okay. And at the time, Jim and I, at the time we had this argument, we were engaged, and my brother was living with me, and my brother got a 3-for-1 deal on orange juice, and then put them in the refrigerator lined up, and
in a horizontal line, not a
I
to the long
yeah.
axis of the refrigerator line.
And my 28-year-old self might have overreacted to.
3 containers of orange juice.
They were taking up all of the prime real estate
We
in
got
the
back
refrigerator.
later. We saved orange juice containers for 6 months, and one day replaced everything in the refrigerator with orange juice containers. And that's one of the lessons we're going to come to.
Okay.
Humor.
Self-ridicule is a powerful force.
Yes.
Awesome.
So,
Okay.
you hear about all of those kind of piddly things, but they tend to add up. And kind of what we're here to talk about today is how you can avoid getting to the resentment and contentment phase, or contentment. Resentment and then contempt phases.
Yeah, we want to avoid contentment.
Right.
Yeah, we do.
Because we want to avoid contempt.
Contempt, we want to avoid that. It's actually the small things that you have to work at over time. And this is not just in marriage, this is really in any kind of personal relationship, is things that are repetitive don't engage our focus in the same way that a flood or a pandemic, to use today's example. Our guard is down. We're not putting energy into the problem and energy into that moment in the relationship, so we end up having small problems. And some of them, I group them into sort of their subjects that cause a lot of conflict, and then there are some behaviors that cause a lot of conflict. And even though I put it all together as small things, they're important to kind of get control of, and I would say to get control of pretty early in any relationship, not just
Snowball.
they do snowball.
Build.
Exactly. Exactly. So they're sort of exactly the small subjects are things you would predict: money, kids. How do you deal with your in-laws? Who's going to do chores?
Which chores and
What you're going to do with your free time. What about that really annoying friend that she has and has had all your life who just never thought you were suitable? You never had that one. Nor did I, just so we're clear. But it's things like that.
You have face. You have a face. Did you have a oh, okay.
No, he didn't have a friend. No, I passed all the friend interviews. I had multiple friend interviews.
My friends actually staged an intervention because they were concerned that I was going to pass on this wonderful opportunity and go back to somebody else that they all felt, while really sweet, not really.
Right.
Not marriage material for
Yes.
Right. And whereas my girlfriends were, he doesn't get that people are afraid of him. He just doesn't generally. And yes, they are, especially when, they call him up. One of my birthdays was coming up, and so he was planning a surprise party. He's been great at this. And so one of my girlfriends calls him at the office. And, and he answers, do your voice. How do you answer the phone normally at the office?
normally,
Yes,
Jim Loftus.
exactly. And my friend was just like, it was hysterical. So yeah, I had
people
that.
know his voice, Leslie. They
Yeah.
hear it. They've heard it 50 times so far.
Exactly.
Beginning of every episode.
I don't need to get him to do a.
Later
Anyway,
when we
but
do an NSF, not safe for work podcast, I'll tell you about my stint on Radio Moscow.
Yeah, I heard. I got about a 30-second clip of that when we were actually recording the intro, and it was shocking.
But let's talk about behaviors for a second.
Yes.
So the behaviors are actually less obvious and they require a bit more thought. But again, they're not conceptually hard to manage, but they're things that you really need to pay attention to. And the key is that marriage is a partnership. And I know that doesn't sound terribly sexy, but it really is the cornerstone, that attitude to I am in a partnership. And it applies to everything. And as I said earlier, it applies even to sex, which is, important. But the behaviors themselves, the things you have to focus on doing, are ways of showing the person that you're in a dialogue with, so that when you're in conflict with them, they know that you're being genuine with them.
Right.
Things like, you notice that every time she talks, I make eye contact with her. I've done that. I do this deliberately. And because
We had been married for 15 years before he taught me, because I hadn't really noticed it, to name it. And it turns out, when my mother was living with us at the time, and I was like, she just listens to you much more than she listens to me. And that's when he finally explained the eye contact. I'm like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. And you do
really
have to
does
listen.
work,
You have to actually pay eye contact. You have to listen to what they're saying.
Put down what you're doing.
So those are sort of things you have to practice doing every day. But it's really crucial. And there's a raft of research on why eye contact in a dialogue instills trust. It instills confidence in the speaker, not only in their ability to speak to you, but in
And everybody's
you're
felt
listening
this
to them.
before. You're talking to somebody and they're not making eye contact with you, or they're looking at your phone. Even if they're half listening to you, or even if they're really concentrated on some emergency, and you feel insulted, you feel disrespected, regardless of the reality of it. But
Yeah,
that
your subconscious ordering says, my husband is sitting there and he's responding to me. And even if it's obvious that you're listening to everything because you're responding in context, if you're not making eye contact, if you haven't turned your body, the person says, his iPad is more important than me. That little bitty mean part of your lizard brain goes, well, what's with that phone? Look at me. I'm and you are pretty special. And you should be looking at me, not the phone, right?
On the partnership thing, I want you to, because this is something that you said to me early on, and it really changed how I thought of our arguments. But okay, well, I'll tell you.
It's probably something my dad told me to say.
It's probably something your dad told you to say. But he was like, "Look, Leslie, I love you."
I never say that.
Yes.
I never say, "Look, Leslie."
Okay,
I'm thinking about it.
I love you. I married you. I have dedicated the rest of my life to being your partner. If something I say could come off as one of two ways, as either insulting or careless, you can bet it's going to be just careless. And, so tell me about it, but don't assume the worst case scenario, because I'm not insulting you, and certainly not unintentionally. If just assume the best out of my intentions, because I can guarantee you that's what they are. Now, if I don't realize that I've insulted you, absolutely let me know and we can talk through that. But don't assume I did it intentionally. Don't assume I did it with malice.
Yeah, no,
that was huge.
Yeah, it was, but it requires, it's one thing for me to say to you, hey, I want you to assume good faith on my part and commitment on it.
That was it. That's how we said it.
But that imposes a duty on me that to listen when you say, okay, was it careless? This made me feel bad. So you've got to be open to hearing. Mm-hmm. If you're saying, look, it was almost always going to be a mistake, not intentional, fine. But you have to be open to hearing, okay, was this a mistake? So you have to, and it has to work both ways. Both parties have to do it. Mm-hmm. So the next thing I would say is that you have to understand the rough edges, and this is really important. And not just your partner's rough edges. Of course, Leslie doesn't have any rough edges. And,
professional husband on a closed course. Don't try this at home.
But I do have some. And
See?
but You might have one or two. But they're all part of who we are. And you don't get to, it's not like a Chinese menu. It's not like I like the face, I like the body, really appreciate all her skills, but I just can't accept, how she
Interrupts all the time.
Right?
I get a lot of flack for interrupting. Not from him, actually, from him.
The partner is the person is your partner, not parts of the person that you like.
Right.
And
That's
so
the whole thing.
So you just kind of have to internalize, that's one of her rough edges. Okay, but I adore her otherwise.
Right.
And I know she does that for me. She got over the fact that I was bald pretty quickly. Despite a Greek chorus of people telling her, but he's bald.
No, well, and okay, honestly.
Oh, really?
I have to say this. I feel so very bad about this. When we first got married,
Is this going to be an admission?
No, yeah, I've admitted
Should
this
we get
one.
Sean's turning camera off?
No, I've admitted this one before.
Mark for edit.
His hairdresser, wanted to do this haircut, and I just thought shaving his head sounded so awful. So I'm like, no, you can't do that. You can't do that. And so it was after the twins were born. So
That's when the rest of it fell out after those two came out.
And he'd asked, and he can't really, and I'm like, you know what? Fine, do what you like. He looks so good. Well, first of all, I'm kind of hacked at him as he looks better than when we got married, and Which
shows you something about faith on her part.
Right.
Okay, I'm going to swallow it.
I'm going to play the long game here.
Anyway, I just can't believe I was saying,
I think that's what she's saying.
No, I should have let you get the hair. The haircut's awesome. But I just...
But no, understanding that everyone's rough edges and just being willing to just let it roll off you, because you don't need to correct everything. And it's sort of disrespectful. It's either they are your partner or they're not. And if they are, you just got to play through it. It doesn't mean if they do something that's really awful, that you shouldn't, or if they're doing something that's self-destructive, because your job really is to protect them from themselves, and theirs is to protect you.
Well, and at this point, Ryan and I have done a lot on just general marriage tips and relationships and everything. That's one of the things we've discussed is the 4 A's: adultery, abuse, abandonment, and addiction. Those are beyond the rough edges kind of stuff.
Does addiction to caffeine count?
No.
Okay, good.
Total pass.
Thank goodness.
So you thought I was going to make an adultery joke.
I know. Where are we
He's
going?
over there going, where's he going with this?
Get ready to mark for edit again.
Coffee.
But you also have to, this is the hardest thing for people like me anyway, is calling your own fouls.
Yeah.
You got to be willing to put your hand up and go, look, I'm very sorry. I didn't mean that. Or, sorry, I didn't get to that. Or, that was a mistake on my part. And our biggest issue, we had some in-law challenges, which don't bear going into. But on her side of the family, there was some conflict with, not necessarily conflict with me, just dissatisfaction with who I was. And in their mind, what I was causing their daughter to do. And on my side, there was sort of a failure to perceive, hey, that's a married couple now, and there are boundaries here, and they need to be observed.
Because he was the first to get married, and not until I was almost 30, he was almost 40. So, there's...
And as soon as
habits were set.
And as soon as you start saying, you know what, you're right, her ability to tolerate the problem that my family generated, and my ability to tolerate the problem that hers was generating, was instantly vastly better. As soon as we were both, because now it's us and we have that problem. And it's on your side of the family, but it's our problem.
Right.
Or it's on my side of the family, but it's our problem. And as soon as you kind of, we got a problem.
These are all about framing your problem, how you think about the problems and the conflicts that you have, how you perceive them has a big effect on how you work with them. There's a big difference between this is my problem, that's your problem, and this is our problem.
Yeah.
Huge difference.
Yeah, huge. And then we also were talking about sharing duties. And then we had, there's a lot written about sharing responsibilities and chores and duties. And about, 90% of it's crap?
Yeah, especially these days. I think in one of our beginning episodes we talk a bit about, there used to be more solid gender roles and expectations going into a marriage about you do this, and the wife does this and the husband does this. Most of that is broken down, but you still need to divide the work. This is one of the things we talk about a lot in the Life Administration podcast. Who does what, how do you schedule that, how do you get it done? But now there's not the old assumptions of, well,
but
the guy
key
does
is you
this
have
and the
to
girl.
define it. The key is you have to actually divide it.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, and that means you have to accept how the other person's doing it, right? So,
and you have to talk through it, and you have to figure it out, and once again, without malice, because it's not.
Yeah. But one of the things that over time, I think we have. I joke with the kids. I will say, because Leslie and I are both lawyers, I say, I'm sorry, Mom has jurisdiction over that question. You need to go ask her. and of course, I know that they're coming to get me to say something different than Leslie is saying.
Right.
So we will.
And that hasn't changed, by the way. Kids trading both of it. I got a no from Mom, so I'm going to go check with Dad. Oh,
But
instant
they never
disqualification.
make that work because we long ago sort of divided who's responsible for what.
Right.
You want to
Well,
put
then
something
also
up
it's
on
an
the wall in the
automatic
house.
no if you try that crap.
Yeah, you want to put something on the wall in the house. If you don't get Mom's permission, it isn't happening.
Right.
And if you want to make a change, I don't know, pick something. If you want to go, I want to modify the cars. For some reason, that turned out to be my responsibility.
Because I know zip all about cars.
Right.
I know slightly above zip, but and it ended up like money was a good example. Very early on, Leslie was. This is one of your rough edges. Leslie was very concerned about transparency in our family because we took the decision at the very beginning we were going to have one bank account.
Right. Good advice.
And again, it's the kind of we thing.
Very good. And she was. There'd been an incident in her past where she felt like money was being used as a controlling mechanism, right? And knowledge about money was used to control someone that she cared about and really just didn't like that. And this was a fight. It was an actual fight. And so in a rare moment of clarity, I got up, walked into the other room, got the file box that had all of our finances and just put it in her lap and said, okay, you're responsible for this from now on.
I think this was like month 9 in marriage.
Yeah, and she still is. 20 years later, we have a perfect division of labor.
The real division of labor that came out is that he and I both do the macro budget planning together, the big picture stuff, and then I do all of the detail work.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, it's probably my biggest regret because I love doing detail work. Yeah, Sean's got thumbs down.
Said no one ever.
Said no one. Well, no, there are some people. There really are some
know.
people that like doing detail work.
There are curious
especially in
creatures out there.
Yeah.
But it's not. I mean, so there's been more than one time that I've been like, oh my god, God damn it.
But so sharing duties is easier when you have clearly demarcated spheres of responsibility and clearly, and as Leslie said, clear understandings.
Yes.
Right.
And that's like conflict prevention.
It is conflict.
Yeah,
prevention.
not
And
too
that's,
much
by the way,
resolution, but-
conflict prevented is still
So
best
much better
method
than-
of distribution. And we'll talk about that. I think we have another segment we're going to talk about conflict resolution. But also it's also accepting how the other person's going to do whatever the duty is, right? And Leslie uses this example all the time. If you're a new mother and you decide you're going to, as Leslie did to me, take off and leave me with the 3-month-old baby while she went off to the Virgin Islands for a weekend.
He was 7 months old at the time, not
Was he
3.
7?
No. I went
Until they talk
overnight.
to you, it's like
I went overnight on the
2 days.
when
2
he was
days.
3 months old. No, the 7-month-old thing was 4 days. 5
And so, and to her credit, she practiced what she preached, but some of her friends have not, and we've heard a lot about this. My job is to bathe and feed the child.
Yes.
Not to bathe and feed the child in the exact way that she would.
Yes.
And me bathing the child differently is not necessarily going to lead to drowning. Feeding the child different is not necessarily going to lead to a lifetime of horrifying insulin deficiency.
I never want to think about it again.
Right? No, actually, he much preferred being with dad.
Yeah, and I usually
And I think
phrase
that's,
it, if they're not about, if whoever it is not about to drown the baby or flood the house, shut up.
I think
Baby's gonna get
she
married.
asked how we were doing, and I said, we're sitting on the couch in our underwear, watching the NBA, and eating ice cream out of a tub as God intended.
They even sent me a picture.
Yes.
They even sent me a picture, and yes, they were having a grand old time.
We had a good time. We had a great time.
Whereas I ended up
And he
with
lived.
mastitis.
He lived.
Okay.
And that, you know, that's
But we've got friends who just can't do that. Like they won't. One parent won't let the other parent because you're not doing it right. And in fact, we had one time early on. You remember this, where you said to me, I was doing something you wasn't up to standard, and you made the comment that I just can't stand it when people interfere with me when my parenting. And I looked at her and said, sweetie, when I do it, it's called parenting. Because it's my child too. And to her credit, she went, yes. Yes, it is.
But I was even prepared for that moment. I'd been watching for it for a while, and it still knocked me between the eyes.
Because caring for a child engages like one of the most primordial instincts that we all have, right? We're to protect this new life, which is good. So it's a good sign. But our ability to control it is a sign of being in a robust, transparent and yet still committed partnership. How's that? You like that?
I mean, I'll tell you
I got
guys.
3 euphemisms in one sentence.
That's good.
That was well done.
My wife just recently, she went to Baytown to visit her grandparents, right? And there was a time where she always left me a list. And when I say a list, I mean time gated, right? From 11:30 to 11:45, you're gonna drink water. From 11:45, right, and just down the line we go. And finally,
I found some examples downstairs.
Long list. And now with Alexa, now I got Alexa barking at me every 15 minutes. Drink water.
I would have so done that.
Drink water.
Time to go
Go
running.
outside. Take medicine. You know, I'm just.
Yeah, we wouldn't be married now.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Right. This episode would not be happening.
Oh,
no.
Well, other things wouldn't be happening either.
I would have done it. Absolutely. Absolutely.
But here's the thing that is I think from observation, we actually haven't done this, but we've seen it in way too many friends, and it has led to all sorts of problems, including, unfortunately, divorce.
Yes.
And that is scorekeeping.
Yes.
I washed the dishes yesterday. It's your turn. And she says, I'm busy, recording a podcast. Can you take care of the dishes? And you're like, and then you remember it and then you store it up, and then 9 months later,
the dishes twice in a row.
and 9 months later, she's like, "You remember? I still can't get over the fact that you made me wash the dishes 4 days in a row. I'm stunned that you were that insensitive." I'm like, I'm a guy. I'm like 9 minutes ago, I'm good. Maybe 9 hours ago, 9 months ago. What are we talking about?
I don't actually remember.
I mean, unless it's like how they ask you.
But once again, the prevention stuff we
I got names and dates and stats and.
Other
the
than
prevention
that,
stuff we just talked about would cover most of that, because if you kind of
We're
have,
going to do prevention later.
if we have
I'm
the
following
division-
your list.
I'm re-highlighting the point.
Re-highlighting.
Exactly.
I'll write
It's
that
a
down.
word.
It is now. It's not in the
If
show.
you have a kind of this is my wheelhouse, that's their wheelhouse thing, then there's a little bit less of that scorekeeping.
Yes, absolutely.
Right.
Mhm.
Because then there's just, okay, those are your duties and you didn't get those duties done, which is a completely different point than you're not doing as much as I am.
Yeah, and there's a wonderful technique you can use when someone's like, I don't like what you're doing. Like Leslie has a thing. This is the dirty side of the sink, and this is the clean side of the sink.
And in this time of Corona, aren't you happy that I know how to keep our kitchen
I
uncontaminated?
live in a state of unremitting bliss all the days of my life, having married you. Nonetheless, let's give a moment for the
Okay, no
staff to
comment.
recover.
I can't. I'm choking on my own spit. It's too funny.
Drink some water? I've
No,
got
I'm
some.
good. I'm good because we also have a clean side of the sink, and like I think you and Lauren might be like the same person sometimes.
Lauren and
There's-
I think
like the
we've only
list-
met about twice, but we'll
Your
get along.
spirit animals are linked or something. I don't really know. You know, but one of the things that you said that I think is really important. You said it a long time ago was that the scorekeeping, the division of labor. The chores, that those things, it changes over time, right? So when maybe mom has the baby at first, that like dad has to do way more, right? That it is 50-50, but ultimately at the same time,
I think
you
we
might,
talked about that in planning for a baby.
yeah,
Yes.
you might have to come extra ways, right?
Right.
And this is not about scorekeeping. Do you remember the time I did this, that, and the other thing?
Right.
Is that the division of labor and abilities and all those things that it's over the course of a lifetime.
Yes,
And
but
that there
now
are
that our
swings.
oldest is 16, and you know, so 2 years, good Lord, 2 years away from
I know.
going to college, etc. The division of parenting time that Jim and I have put in on him is very much starting to equalize because at the
Yeah.
beginning, real mom heavy, especially since I was the at-home parent.
Mm-hmm.
Once we got north of 5, he's been rising. He puts in more parenting time with the teenagers than I do now.
Mm-hmm.
With the exception of maybe, you know, because I still am the at-home spouse, so I'm the one that's like doing some of the daily stuff. But the real nitty-gritty, you know, answering the questions about why the sky is blue, hands-on, getting in there with discipline, everything else, mostly him now. Back when they were 2, it was mostly me.
We're starting to see that transition
Yep.
with my daughter.
You've got a
She-
3-year-old, and
yeah,
that's
she's
about where.
about to turn 4 in April, and so now it's but why daddy? But why daddy? Right? And so and Lauren is she's just not into it. Right? I will answer but why daddy until I am blue in the face. I will come up with explanation after explanation after explanation. If I don't know it, we'll Google it, whatever.
Let's
Like
have him ride in a car with Ian. That's our nephew.
yeah.
Oh, long
No.
play why-a-thon. Why? The answer is always at the end, it's a machine or because God wills it.
And you might be an hour into this game before you finally throw up.
That's it.
Machine.
I tried it in Latin once, Deus Luol, and it didn't,
That didn't
slow down.
That's
It wasn't even a rumble bump. He just kept playing right through it.
I don't understand what you're saying.
One time I
need
stopped
to
speaking English entirely to him. Spoke only Russian. Didn't slow him down.
Why?
But why?
Uncle Jim, why'd you say it that way?
Oh
Uncle
my
Jim, what'd you
gosh.
say?
Это
Well, why'd
что
you
это
say that?
правда.
Okay, so let's shift gears a little bit. We sort of talked about the problems, things in the past. Let's talk about preventative measures going into the future, right?
We just did preventative now, don't we need
No,
to do?
we have not prevented yet.
Okay,
I mean, it's like herding cats.
Ooh, I sided with his mic. That was my revenge
Yeah,
side.
that was. Whoa.
We're going to have to disinfect that puppy.
Yeah.
No, actually, it's the sound. He has to equalize the sound so I don't blow
Because
out
the
anybody's
air.
car mic.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mark
So-
read it. No, just kidding. All right, we're moving on. So here we go. So
Yes, but where are we moving?
we are moving on. Jim, please give us a little bit of insight to preventative conflict resolution.
Choose your marriage partner wisely. Which I did.
Yes.
Or I didn't do the choosing. You do know that, right?
No.
No, I was chosen.
You were
I was you're marked for edit. I was.
You're marked for marriage.
Yeah. There's a great story about for the podcast.
Seriously, gonna tell all the stories?
No, I'm
Well,
saying
See, and I actually thought he was gonna go with his dad's story. Because his dad chose me.
Oh yeah, that was. Well, he was concerned.
Off topic.
Stay on target.
No, pull up.
So let's. So the key issue about. Okay, so now I'm going to sort of step away from being just a husband,
Yes.
father, and step more into how do we resolve conflicts. But these rules apply, I think, really across the board. It is the recognition of why am I in conflict is crucial. It is a permanent concern. You must constantly bear in mind what it is that we're in conflict about. And that will change over time. What are we in conflict about now? hopefully you're getting narrower and narrower. And it's one of the most difficult things to focus on. I mean, you need to be, what is actually dividing us right now? Because if you don't, eventually you sort of descend into arguing, and then we're 2 steps away from reality TV. We don't want to be there.
Right.
We want to keep our eye on the prize. So why are we in conflict? Because that's the only way, that's the only light that gets you out, is because you have to know what you're arguing about. So you're absolutely right, Leslie's right, that prevention is by far the best dispute resolution mechanism. And that requires a combination of things. One is understanding what you need. What is it that you want? And you have to be honest with yourself, right? I just want to win. Pointless. I want her to be different. Pointless. You need to understand specifically what it is. I'm tired of her leaving. I'm just not going to go there. Pull it up.
Yes. Pull up.
Her makeup on my vanity, whatever, right? And you need to understand what your conflict is. So, and because as soon as you understand what it is, you can begin to do some things. Sort of dispute triage. A lot of stuff is small stuff. Forget about it. Don't worry about it. As it gets more and more significant, it's still by sort of cutting it down to size and understanding what you're really in conflict about, you can begin to understand 2 really important things. One is, if it's a small problem, then there's a small solution for it. Right? If it's not life-threatening, and most things are not, then there's a solution that's within your grasp. Right? And so that's one big thing to resolve that. And the second thing is, by understanding it, you can begin to communicate what the problem is to the other person. Right? I need you not to leave my makeup there. Saying you're a slob in the bathroom. She's not, by the way. I'm just using this as an example.
Yeah,
we have a child who is.
Yes, we do.
Right? That's a meaningless statement of the problem. You're a slob in the bathroom. It's an attack on them. It generalized. It doesn't give them a path out to resolving their conflict with you. So you've got to be focused on what you're actually in.
Whereas it annoys me when you leave this makeup stuff
And
here.
Prevention is really
Easy
the key.
problem.
And the key to that is looking over the horizon. This is going to become a problem. And a significant part of what I actually get paid for is that sort of, let's look over the horizon. Don't do that now, because if we do that now, it's going to be this problem in the future, right? I mean, it's going to, we need to play the game a few moves ahead and realize what the problem's going to be. So let's try to prevent it. If we can't, then it's important to recognize that we're actually in conflict, because once we're in conflict, things you say take on heightened meaning, right? You've got to be real careful about that. You need to identify the problem I mentioned earlier, and then you kind of got to frame it. And by framing it is, you have to put it in its, to contextualize it. What kind of problem is it? One is magnitude, small, medium, large problem. The other is the type of problem. Is it urgent? Is it needs to be attended to? Is it something that's just been bugging you for a while and might continue to bug you, right? So you're looking at it that way, and then you have to kind of frame it in terms of the type of problem it is, right? Is this something that goes to mundane things, where things are stored in the pantry? Leslie would periodically come home and rearrange the kitchen, and I'd go to cook, and I would open the drawer where all the strainers were, and now it was full of ramekins. And I'm like, cool, I like the ramekins here. Where are the strainers? And that's it. It's just mundane stuff. But then there could be,
Humor works.
Then we get up through bigger and bigger problems. We get to sex, and eventually we get to money, right? Which drives people crazy for some reason, more than sex, which is weird. So you got to frame it, and that allows you to understand what types of solutions you need, right? And then build toward resolution. Small problems can be resolved with small, immediate, one-off
And it annoys
changes.
me that you put the makeup here. Oh, okay, well then I won't put the makeup there anymore.
So we
Right.
build toward by solving small pieces of our problem as we go along, right? You put the makeup out here. Would it be useful if I got you a little cabinet to put on your drain board here, so that you can
Ooh,
store
that's
it?
another one of your tips. Come up with offer a
Right.
solution.
This is my dad's, and I think this is sort of the most important thing is Dad had a rule throughout his career in the military and professional life that was, the door was always open, and I use this with my associates too, come in, bring me whatever problem you want to talk about. I only have one requirement. You have to come with a proposed solution. Otherwise, you're just whining.
Right. Don't be a problem spotter. Be a
Right.
problem solver.
Oh, I like that. I'm going to use
Yeah.
that. Or my mentor had a button that he kept on right behind it, on the bulletin board right behind his desk that had the word whining with a big red slash through it.
Yeah.
No whining.
Yeah.
So, those are, none of that's really earth-shattering stuff, but it's understanding what your problem is, stay focused on what it actually is, try to be part of that solution by offering suggestions at an appropriate time with due reverence to your partner.
Well, yeah, because if it's a
Sometimes she
small
doesn't want to hear your
if
proposal.
it's a small problem or a mundane problem, then when your spouse has come in from a terrible day of work or whatever and everything's gone, that's not the time to bring up the small mundane problem that doesn't
No.
have any urgency at all. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, just kind of choose your time.
I think, one of the things that Lauren and I do is on Sunday nights, we just have a 30-minute powwow. And that's where we address the small, mundane problems, right? There's no emotion involved in it at all. We know that we're coming to this table to say, hey, I didn't like the makeup on the counter. Well, I didn't like that you left your socks. By the way, you said you would water the grass 3 times last week. You did it once. Like, can we, right? And it's a very sort of,
Oh, I like that, but you've got to set time for it,
it-
so it's just
it's on our
It's
schedule,
expected.
right? We're going to talk about daily schedules in a little while, and that's one of our rhythms that we put in place is that we have our Sunday night. How are we doing as a couple? And like I know that sounded right then like really awful. That's not what the entire half an hour is about, but it's just a sort of check-in of what's going on, right? And so I think it's appropriate to find these times where emotion is taken out of it. Because and Jim, I wanted to ask you this because I think ego and pride comes in so much in these situations, and I think I would love to know, how does somebody know when I'm just fighting to fight or I'm fighting to win the argument versus this is going to be productive? Because I don't think that we all always know what that looks like.
yeah, and this is one of the big points, because I told him this morning we were going to do this. Well, he'd known we was going to do an episode for a
Yeah.
while, but it was like, hey, can you do the conflict resolution episode today? And by the way, I want you to definitely hit this point. What's your goal in bringing up the fight because if you're just fighting to win, okay, well, lawyers have a thing that if you're suing for revenge, that's a fast way to go completely broke.
It's
If you're fighting to fight, yeah.
well, there are rare occasions when fighting for vindication matters. Reputation, defamation, an injury that was done to, somebody in your family was killed by somebody. I mean, there are times when protecting this freedom of speech, protecting your church from something. There are some things like that where the fight really is important to engage in because of its ability to protect or prevent future problems, right?
Right.
All right, so deal with things before they become big. That's fine. But fighting, we see this all the time. People they're mad, and they want
They want their pound of flesh. They want
and-
justification. They want somebody to tell. If you're fighting because you want
It's
somebody to tell you
horrible.
that you're right,
It's a horrible waste of resources in the commercial world, right? Because you don't get anything for it. There's no return for it.
then it's completely destructive to a relationship in the personal.
Right. In marriage, that's the big driver. Is you're using up the goodwill. First place, I mean, the easy thing is in marriage. I think the question you have to ask yourself is this about me? Is this about a wrong done to me? Right. And if you have accepted the fundamental premise that there's we and then there's me, it's not we're not extinguished as people. We've got our own interests, and I think that's one of the things that's good is we do different things at different times, and we're perfectly happy to give each other space. But in the hierarchy of what's important, we's first and then me. And it's really hard to remind yourself of that. But if you stop
Certainly
and
at the beginning,
say,
it's hard. It gets easier over time.
it does, it eventually becomes effortless.
Right.
But if you stop and frame the question as what's wrong here, and the word I figures prominently in your description, you're probably off track, right?
Yeah,
And that's
good.
And that's why framing is so important. It's so important to sit down and go, what is wrong here? And if it's she hurt my feelings, then say that, right? I don't need to win the argument about whose turn it was to go take out the trash, right? Because that's not what's really going on. It's the way she spoke to me when she said take out the trash, right? And oftentimes that's really the problem. It's not the actual dispute, it's the way in which that dispute is presented and the way in which the dispute resolution is pursued that is...
Escalates instead of...
Yeah, and that's where we get on the road to reality TV. We don't want to be there. We never want to be there.
Right.
And there's a great technique for resolving sort of low-level organizational conflicts, and I think it applies here. And we don't like to talk about it because it's kind of off the table now, but shame is amazing. Right. And I don't mean put a giant letter,
letter M on me from makeup.
I was going to put A on, for
the scarlet letter.
No, not the scarlet letter. I realized the minute I said that, I realized I want that one back. A letter O for obsessive compulsive disorder. Big letter O.
Would you like
of course,
to
they see that. Oh, and O's got some other meanings. You okay there, Ryan?
Yeah, I'm getting flustered.
Okay, but shame in the sense of, like, if your wife went to you and said, "Oh, you know what? You're busy. Let me water the lawn tomorrow." 9 out of 10 people in a good relationship, or even one that's functional, will go, "No, I'm sorry. I'll deal with that."
Yeah.
And and that's like some of my associates have evolved wonderful means of handling me in that way. It's like, I see you didn't send a letter to the tribunal. Let me deal with that. And I'm like, "Oh, I'll do it now." But it's a great way of bringing up the problem in a non threatening, in a way that doesn't bespeak disrespect or contempt.
Yeah.
Yeah, but careful with that because you can slide into passive aggressive pretty quickly.
Oh, you can.
Yeah.
That's why being aware of what you're doing, and always do things on purpose.
Right. That's good.
Oh, I like that. Always do things on purpose.
Yeah. No, that's good. Okay, so we're at the almost 50-minute mark, if you can even believe it.
Longest episode for you. Yes. See, he talks more than I do. I told you.
It's not the longest episode ever, by the way.
It's not?
No.
Oh.
But not by, 54 and 10 is our longest episode, so that was good. Conflict resolution. That's how we do it. Okay, so...
No. His best minor conflict resolution thing is humor. Make me laugh.
Yes, making her laugh is the way to get her off her.
Oh, and his children do it now too.
Topic.
They've I have not learned the humor thing so much, but the kids have.
They're really good at it.
Diffuse.
Yes, no. And sometimes you do just the diffuse and pause.
Yeah.
Well, and it doesn't mean telling slapstick jokes, right?
Right.
Although,
No, it doesn't.
No, it means self-deprecatory humor about our relationship, not contemptuous, not directed at, but about us, not at her, but about us. Because the reason it's so effective psychologically is it's a way, one, it's not about the dispute, but it reminds the person you're using the humor on that, hey, it's us, we're together. Look, we have some shared memories that are amusing. If we get a little too heated, let's be we're about at the border collie intervention stage. We're gonna dial this one back.
Yeah.
Right? And we kind of, oh yeah, that was really embarrassing. Let's don't do that again. Let's don't get told off by the lower order, mammals.
We're really good at reading human emotions.
Yeah.
Yes. Centuries of evolution.
They're totally calm now.
See, they're very calm.
Yeah.
Yeah, very calm.
They're calm.
They're completely not.
Very calm.
We've misplaced the wolfhound. Where did
No,
that?
she went downstairs.
That's right.
How did you misplace a wolfhound? Sorry.
We don't really that often.
So anything else in closing, guys? I mean, this was so much fun. I have not enjoyed. Go ahead.
One keeps going in and out of my mind, and I can't. Oh shoot! There's a good one that we've used. Oh yes, this is one that we've used quite a bit. A lot of times, one person in the marriage is the problem solver, and one person is.
Oh yeah.
So sometimes.
You want to guess who it is?
Sometimes I'll be venting about something or whatever, and Jim will just put
And I'll
my
sit there and
gas
look
in
at it with like maybe one eyebrow
Pause,
raised
yeah.
and wait, am I solving or am I listening?
Right. I don't know what to do.
And she's really good. She goes, I'm venting.
Yep.
Right, and that's all I have to say. And he's like, "Oh, okay, you're listening, cool." Because a lot of it, those of us who aren't always the problem solvers know that sometimes you're just venting something, and then somebody jumps in with, "Oh, well, you should just solve it this way," and you're like, "Sorry, I'm going to make you edit that too." That was probably kind of loud on the microphone, and it gets vexing when all you're trying to right. So he just now point blank. Will ask, am I solving or am I listening?
That's
cool,
good.
I'm listening. Oh, I'm solving? Excellent. Okay, I'm already kind of formulating 1, 2, 3. Here's what you need to do. Works. That's probably prevented, because most of our arguments now are much more low level than
I do
than the
other
border
things.
collie thing. But
I do other things.
I do other things to trick you when you get to that point. Like, you ever notice I call you into my closet to, well, come tell me why. Change clothes?
because sometimes I'll lose my train of thought. Honestly,
It's the change in setting. Now we're in my closet, and now you're like.
And honestly, pausing sometimes, if you can get a pause and a breath in, it can diffuse a lot.
It worked great on like teenage boys when it's chili dogs. What was that argument?
That just solved all my problems. No.
Oh, well, actually, since we're talking about little
Chili
kids.
dogs?
No,
I was thinking the same
with
thing.
kids, especially when you have youngers, because you have, not quite 4.
Yeah.
You're having a conflict with your toddler, an extra hour of sleep, or you need to feed him low blood sugar. I mean, it's just kind of. Sometimes there's just.
And most men, honestly.
Sometimes there's just some.
Pretty well, guys. Too.
Right.
Be fair. Oh my goodness.
You did nothing.
I did indeed.
So, all right. Anything else, guys? It was absolutely amazing. Anything else from the side of the table?
Not for me.
No. Leslie.
Not from me.
Unbelievable.
I
Okay.
know.
Well, let's close it out. Guys, thank you so much for listening. I hope you had as much fun listening to it as we had making it, because it was an absolute blast. Jim, just want to say special thanks. I know you're super busy, and the fact that you could find time for us is amazing. So we look forward to having you again in the future. You just taught me that earlier, right?
Yeah. I look forward to it too.
You're awesome.
We'll be in about 10 minutes.
Guys, if you're listening to this on Google Play, Spotify, or Apple Music, please consider giving us a 5-star rating and leaving us comments. If you're listening to us on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe. Other than that, it's been a blast, and we will see you guys in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.